Hare Krishna. So today we will start with the discussion of the first chapter of Bhagavad-gita. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Anant Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. So the first chapter of the Bhagavad-gita is titled Observing the Armies on the Battlefield of Kurukshetra. It's got 56 verses divided into two broad sections. The first section of 27 verses is essentially setting of the scene, setting the background of the indecisiveness of Arjuna. And the rest of the chapter, 28 to 46, are essentially the doubts of Arjuna, which in a way is also setting the scene for the Bhagavad-gita to be spoken. So let us begin with the first verse. Dhritarashtra vacha dharam kshetra kurukshetre samveta yutsavaha Mamka pandavascheva kim kurvata Sanjaya. Dhritarashtra said, O Sanjay, after my sons and the sons of Pandu assembled in the place of pilgrimage at Kurukshetra, desiring to fight, what did they do? So the Acharyas, they opine that this verse is a summation of the entire Mahabharata. And they also opine that Krishna enacted this Mahabharata in an attempt to draw the attention of everyone towards the speaking of Bhagavad-gita. So at this particular time, in the battlefield of Kurukshetra, so they are some of the most fearsome warriors in the universe who have access to some of the most potent weapons, and they are poised to engage in furious battle with one another, right? And at the price of the battle is not just dominion over the kingdom, but the principles of dharma. Everybody's attention in all the three planetary system is focused on this battle of Kurukshetra, this particular moment. At that time, Krishna speaks the Bhagavad-gita. And the Bhagavad-gita is spoken for the benefit of everyone. For the demigods, for the humans, for the sages, for the benefit of everyone. That is why Krishna funneled everybody's attention to this particular point of time. So even though the Bhagavad-gita appears in Mahabharata, as we discussed earlier on in the Bhishma Parva, which is in the category of Itihas or historical narration, it is actually considered to be an Upanishad, since it gives the essence of the Vedic knowledge. It gives the essence of Dharma. Right? So it is said that the whole summation of the Vedas appears in the 700 verses of Bhagavad-gita. So this verse is Dhritarashtra vacha. Right? This is the only time in Bhagavad-gita that Dhritarashtra speaks. Right? And what does he say? Mamaka Pandavas Chaiva. Right? My sons and the sons of Pandu. So we see that he is making that distinction between his sons and the sons of his brother. Now in the Vedic tradition, that distinction is not made. The elders would consider, especially brothers, especially in the situation where Pandava had died, Dhritarashtra had taken over the guardianship of the Pandavas. So just like Duryodhan and Dushasan were his sons, so were Yudhishthira and Arjuna and the others. But we see that in this wordplay here, Dhritarashtra makes this distinctions. Mamaka Pandavas, my sons and those Pandavas. That is the underlying reason for the war. That Dhritarashtra is not able to develop this inclusive mentality. What does the word Dhritarashtra mean? So Dhrita means tenacious, right? One who is holding on to something strongly. And what is Dhritarashtra holding on? Rashtra. So he has this unfortunate propensity of wanting to hold on to the kingdom. Now Dhritarashtra was the eldest. He was older than Pandu, but unfortunately he was born blind. So he could not ascend the throne. So even though he was ruling for a long time, earlier when Pandu went to the forest and then when Pandu died, but his role was always one of a caretaker. And this was something that Dhritarashtra always resented. So he wanted this battle to happen so that his ownership is clearly established through his son Duryodhan. Many times people think that Duryodhan was the cause of Mahabharata, but he was not. Duryodhan was simply the symptom of the ambition of Dhritarashtra. And in the Mahabharata we see that Duryodhan does so many things and Dhritarashtra stays quiet, essentially encouraging him on that path. So Dhritarashtra vacha dharma kshetra kurukshetra, right? So the Bhagavad-gita begins with the word dharma and it actually ends with the word dharma. In 1870, when Krishna is concluding his instructions, he refers to his conversation as dharmayam samvadam. That have you listened to this conversation about dharma? So indicating that Bhagavad-gita is a book of dharma. It's a book about the eternal duty of the jiva. In later on, when Arjun says that he's bewildered, karpanya dosha pahata svabhava, then he says, I'm bewildered about my duty, right? And that time, what does he say? He says, prachhami tvam dharma samudra cheta, right? Now you should instruct me on the principles of dharma, right? And a few words down, 2.9, Arjun says that I will not fight, right? In the end of the first chapter, he says, I will not fight. And 2.9, he again says, Krishna, I will not fight. After that, 8 times in the Bhagavad-gita, Krishna will ask Arjun to fight. In 1859, towards the end of his instruction, Krishna directly tells him the consequences of not fighting, right? But this is not a book of violence, right? It is a book of dharma. It is a book of duty towards one's varnashram and duty ultimately towards Krishna. So Dhritarashtra begins with dharma not because he was vested into dharma, but actually because he was scared of dharma, because he himself was adharmic. So he is worried about the influence of this dharmic place, Kurukshetra. Right? There's a bit of the history of Kurukshetra in Vaman Puran, where King Kuru actually chose this land on the banks of Saraswati river, and he performed extended austerities over there. And then finally Lord Vishnu appeared and he gave him 2 boons. He said that this land will forever be known will be considered as a place of pilgrimage. Right? It will be named after him, Kurukshetra, forever be considered as a place of pilgrimage. And then second boon that was given to him, that anyone dying in this land, in the pursuance of their duty, will go to heaven. And that was one reason why they had assembled at this place. So Dhritarashtra is concerned because he himself is not dharmic, but he's saying this is a place of dharma, like dharma kshetra kurukshetra. So what he's concerned is that because of the pious influence of this place, maybe my sons will not fight. Because of the pious influence of the presence of Krishna and the Pandavas, maybe Duryodhan and his and his brothers and others will agree to have a truce. Because remember, before the battle, there were many attempts made to avoid the battle. Krishna went himself as a messenger. And now, when the battle is about to happen, Dhritarashtra is anxious that let there be no truce. Because he was confident of his own victory. Why? Because he had some of the most powerful warriors in his army. Right? He had people like Bhishma Dev. Bhishma Dev was unconquerable. He had fought with Parshuram and defeated him. He had Dronacharya. Dronacharya was a disciple of Parshuram. He was the spiritual master of the Pandavas. He had his own son Duryodhan. He had Karna. Very, very powerful warriors. So he was at this point considering that victory is almost inevitable. So his concern now is that let the battle not be stopped in any situation. Now, factually, Dhritarashtra is not wrong about the pious influence of Kurukshetra. Right, so it is said, this is actually said in the Bhagavatam, in the 3rd canto, 2nd chapter, that those who died in battle, they achieved perfection. That those who were opposed to the Pandavas, they were purified by the arrows of Arjuna. And those who were serving Krishna through the Pandavas, they achieved perfection. So in a way, all those soldiers who died performing their duty, they achieved perfection. So Srila Prabhupada in the purport says, all the activities of a pure devotee are executed on behalf of the Lord, because a pure devotee of the Lord has nothing to do for his personal interest. Arjun's killing was as good as killing by the Lord himself. As soon as Arjun shot an arrow at an enemy, that enemy became purified of all material contamination and became eligible to be transferred to the spiritual sky. This was an additional benediction by the presence of Krishna. Because the original benediction was that he would get a heavenly abode, but because of the presence of Krishna and his devotee, the soldiers both on the side of the Pandavas and Kauravas, they actually were liberated. They reached the spiritual world. So let's move on to the next verse. So verse 1.2. Sanjay Vacha Drishvatu Pandavanikam Yuddham Duryodhanastada Acharyam Upsangmaya Raja Vachanam Abravit. Sanjay said, O king, after looking over the army arranged in military formation by the sons of Pandu, King Duryodhan went to his teacher and spoke the following words. So here we see Sanjay's response to Dhritarashtra's question. So Sanjay was the charioteer of Dhritarashtra, and he was a confidant, a close associate of Dhritarashtra. So Dhritarashtra was not only blind physically, but he was also blind dharmically. And Sanjay was a disciple of Srila Vyasadeva, himself an elevated person. As you know, Vyasadeva had given him this benediction that he could see everything that was going on in the battle everywhere, along with its import. So he was sitting there and narrating the events as they happened to Dhritarashtra. So when Sanjay hears Dhritarashtra saying, Tram Kshetra Kurukshetre Samveta Yutsava Mamka Pandavaschayava Kim Kurvata Sanjaya, right? So in a way, he could say that, why are you asking this question, Kim Kurvata? What did they do? Isn't it clear that they have assembled in this place of battlefield to fight? They're not going to do anything else. But Sanjay understood that Dhritarashtra's fear was that the influence of dharma might change the course of the battle. So what does he do? He brings the attention to the one person on the battlefield who was most committed to the battle, and that was Duryodhan. Right, so he says, Drishvatu Pandavanikam Yuddham Duryodhanastada. So he brings his attention right away to Duryodhan. That don't worry, as long as Duryodhan is there on the battlefield, the war will happen. Right, and he says, Raja Vachanam Abravit. So he refers to Duryodhan as Raja. And there are two reasons. One is that we will see that Duryodhan will speak in the mood of Rajniti. The Rajniti is politics. So in politics, you speak one thing, you mean another thing, you intend another thing. So we will see that Duryodhan in the next set of verses, he will speak as a Raja, Rajniti. So he's calling him Raja Vachanam. The other is also a form of sarcasm, because even though Sanjay was an associate of Dhritarashtra, he served him, but he wasn't very favorably inclined to his adharmic tendencies. So there is a little bit of sarcasm when he says Raja, because Duryodhan was actually not the king. Right? He was not even actually the prince, because Dhritarashtra was not the king. He was a custodian king. Right? But he's saying to kind of subtly indicate that you're doing this whole battle to make Duryodhan a Raja, to make Duryodhan a king. So let's see what happens. Also, and again, these words have spoken by very, very elevated people, so they're very nuanced. There are many layers of meaning. Also, in a way to reassure Dhritarashtra that your son is inevitably going to become a king. Right? So three meanings of the word Raja. One is Rajniti, that you will now see Duryodhan engage in political talk. So Vachanam is Vachan is essentially in this context considered to be empty words. So the politicians are famous for speaking empty words. They try to make words that arouse the enthusiasm of the people, that speak just to the moment, but they don't really mean anything. So he says Raja Vachanam. So in following the process of Rajniti, he speaks these empty words. Also, Raja to say that don't worry, my dear friend Dhritarashtra, your son will become Raja, will become king. And third, in a form of sarcasm, that all this you are going to do to make him king. Let's see what happens. So let's move on to the next verse. Okay, reading from verse 1.3. Pashyatam Panduputranam Acharya Mahitam Chamum Vyudham Druvadaputrena Tavashishena Dhimata. O my teacher, behold the great army of the sons of Pandu, so expertly arranged by your intelligent disciple, the son of Drupad. So this is spoken by Duryodhan, even though it doesn't say Duryodhan Uvacha, because of the context set by Sanjay, that Duryodhan approached Drona and spoke this. So this is a conversation now between Duryodhan and Dronacharya. And following the protocols, actually Drona should have been summoned to be in front of Duryodhan, because he represented Dhritarashtra. He had a superior position. Drona was the commander in chief. But Duryodhan, following Rajniti, he knew that the outcome of the battle largely is dependent on the investment by the commander in chief. So he relinquishes, and Duryodhan was famous for being very proud, but he relinquishes that pride, gets up from his chariot, and he approaches Dronacharya to say that I am the king, but I am personally coming to you. That's how important you are. Right? Now what does he say? He says, Pashyatam Pandu Putranam. Pashyatam, that behold Etam, behold this army. And it is bringing attention to the fact that the sons, Pandu Putra Nam, that the sons of Pandu have insulted you because their army has approached so close to you with arrogance. They have not considered your exalted position as one of the greatest warrior of the universe. They haven't considered your exalted position as an acharya, as a teacher. So seeing that, you should recognize their disrespect. So one of Duryodhan's concern was that Drona would not fight to his full capacity against the Pandavas, because it was no secret that Drona was very favorable to the Pandavas. So were Bhishma. They were actually fighting against them only because they had loyalty to the throne. But in terms of personal interaction, they were both, Bhishma and Drona, very favorable to the Pandavas. And Drona especially was very favorable to Arjun. So Duryodhan wants to basically create resentment within Dronacharya. So he said, look, this army has approached so close to you out of disrespect to you, that you think that Arjun is your favorite disciple. He doesn't think you're his guru. That's why he's brought the army so close to you. Right? And then what does he say? That Vyudam Drupadaputrena. So the commander-in-chief of the Pandavas was Drishtadumna. And Drishtadumna is the son of Drupad. Duryodhan could have addressed him as Drishtadumna, but he doesn't. He says Drupadaputrena. And there's a reason behind this, because Dronacharya and Drupad, they were mortal enemies. So initially, and there's a long backstory, we won't go into that, but initially they were friends. They were in the Gurukul together. Drupad was the king, and Drona was a Brahman, and later on Drupad insulted Drona. So to take revenge, Drona attacked with the Pandavas. He attacked Drupad. He took half his kingdom there, and because of that, Drupad was very, very angry with Dronacharya, but he understood that he could not defeat Dronacharya. So he performed a yajna, and in the yajna, two personalities appeared. One was Draupadi, and the other was Drishtadumna. And Drishtadumna appeared specially with this benediction, so to speak, that he would be the cause of the death of Dronacharya. So Dronacharya was aware of this. So later on, when Drupad sends Drishtadumna over to Dronacharya to receive training, Dronacharya happily accepted him as a Brahman, saying that he's a qualified disciple, and he taught him all the arts of military warfare. Right? So that is why he says that Duryodhan says that Tava Shishyena Dhimata, that your disciple, the son of Drupad, right? So he's making two things clear here. He's saying that he's the son of your mortal enemy, but you still accepted him as a disciple. That's a big mistake on your part. Now Dhimata means intelligent. So he is applying Dhimata to Drishtadumna, saying Drishtadumna is intelligent, he is not foolish like you. That he is using all that you have taught him to fight against you and eventually kill you. But you are not intelligent. You made this mistake of taking Drishtadumna as your student and giving him all the teachings for the art of warfare. So in this way, in one shlok, in one short sentence, Duryodhan, he's churning so many things. Right? He's bringing to attention the so-called disrespect by Pandu Putranam, by the Pandus, by getting their army close to Dronacharya. He's reminding Dronacharya of his past and even the present, the present falling out that he has with Drupad. So he says Drupad Putrena, that your enemy, he's the son of your enemy. And then he says Shishyas Dhimati, that your disciple is intelligent because he took knowledge from you, but you were not. So the point that Duryodhan wants to make is that you made many mistakes in the past. By being lenient on them, by teaching the Pandavas, they are taking advantage of all that. Now, do not make any more mistakes. Now, make sure that you fight with all your might. Okay, so let's go on to the next verse. So we'll do the next 3 verses, verses 4, 5 and 6. Atra Sura Maheshvasha Bhima Arjun Samayudhi Yuddhan Viratascha Dropadascha Maharata Drishtaketus Cheketana Kasiracha Viryavan Purujit Kunti Bojascha Shabyascha Narapungava Yudamanyuscha Vikranta Utamayajuscha Viryavan Saubhadra Dropadeyascha Sarvaeva Maharataha. Here in this army are many heroic bowmen equal in fighting to Bhima and Arjun. Great fighters like Yuddhan, Virat and Drupad. There are also great heroic powerful fighters like Drishtaketu, Chekita, Kasiraj, Purujit, Kunti Bhoj and Shaibya. There are the mighty Yudamanyu, the very powerful Utamayuja, the son of Subhadra and the sons of Draupadi. All these warriors are great chariot fighters. So, in the last verse, when Drona goes to Drupad and trying to incite him to fight to his utmost capacity, Drupad might say that, why are you unnecessarily scared? We have a much larger army. So there were 18 Akshunis. 18 Akshunis was like considered to be like a regiment or a unit of warriors. So one Akshuni had a combination of different kind of warriors, chariot fighters, horsemen, soldiers. But if you add all of them, an Akshuni comes out to be 218,700 warriors. And the Kauravas had 11 Akshunis, whereas the Pandavas only had 7 Akshunis. So Drona might say that they have a small army, and it's by Drishtadyumna. You say he's intelligent, but he's ultimately my disciple. So we can easily conquer them. Do not fear. Now Drupad, Duryodhan as a politician, he wants to make sure that there is no complacency there, right? So he wants to establish further criterias because of which they have to be careful, right? He's saying that, fine, their army is smaller than us, but they have great warriors who are skillful in the art of fighting, right? And then he lists the 17 warriors on the side of Pandavas. So he says that Bhima Arjun Samayudhi, right? So he is using Bhima and Arjun as a yardstick. That there are warriors, the Pandavas have warriors that are comparable in their fighting skills to Bhima and Arjun. Because Bhima and Arjun were famous all over the world as one of the foremost warriors. So Duryodhan compares them to Bhima and Arjun. And he mentions the word Bhima. He mentions the name Bhima first because everybody was aware that Bhima was the most determined warrior. So even though Arjun may have been a more accomplished warrior, and they had different weapons. Arjun was a bowman and Bhima fought with a mace. But generally Arjun was considered to be a warrior to be feared more. But Duryodhan mentions Bhima because it was well known that Bhima was most determined to fight this battle. So during the disrobing of Draupadi, Bhima had taken 3 vows. One, that he would drink the blood of Dushashan. The second was that he would break the thigh of Duryodhan, because Duryodhan had asked Draupadi to sit on his thigh. And then finally, he said that he would kill all the 100 Kauravas because they had supported Duryodhan. So, factually, we will see that by the end of Mahabharata, Bhima actually fulfills all the three vows. So, we also see, a little bit of an aside, we also see that there is a difference between Yudhishthir and Bhim. Bhim is very violent by nature, very ghastly, making these vows that drinking the blood and breaking the thighs, etc. Now, even Arjun was killing, but Bhim was much more. In fact, in the battle of Mahabharata, Bhim kills a lot more of the Kauravas than Arjun did. And it is said that when Bhim used to shout, when he used to roar, then the soldiers on both the sides, even the Pandava sides, they would become unconscious, just out of fear of his ferocity. So that's why Duryodhan, he first says, there are warriors comparable to Bhima, who is so ferocious, so ghastly, who is willing to make such kinds of vows. And there are other warriors like them. So Dronacharya, you have to be extra careful. Then some of the other warriors that are listed in this. So Yudhana refers to Satyaki. So Satyaki was a disciple of Arjun, and he was a relative of Krishna. So there's a little bit of backstory that both Duryodhan and Yudhishthir, they went to Krishna to get his help in the battle. And so Krishna offers them a choice, me or my army. And Duryodhan takes the army, and Yudhishthir happily says Krishna. So even though Krishna's Narayani army, he had said one Akshuni. So one Akshuni of Narayani's army was fighting on the side of the Kauravas. There were some of relatives of Krishna who were fighting along with Krishna. So Satyaki, Chekitana, Sayanjita, they used some technicality that they predated the Dwarka pastimes of Krishna. They knew Krishna from the time of Mathura, so they used that technicality to say that actually we don't really belong to your Dwarka family, so we can fight on your side. But what happened essentially was that in the battle of Mahabharata, they were relatives of Krishna who were fighting against one another, right? So there was Satyaki, he was fighting against Bhurishwar. Bhurishwar was both, they were both from Dwarka. So he mentions Satyaki because Satyaki was also, he was trained by Arjun and considered to be a great warrior. Then mentions Virat, mentions Drupad, again to incite the anger of Drona, that your old enemy Drupad is fighting against you. Chekitana, Kesira, Judamanyu, so these were all classified as Maharathis, right? So it is said that a Maharathi is one who can alone fight with 10,000 opponents, and then Atirathi is one who is one level below that, and a Rathi is one who can fight with a single opponent, right? One on one. And then Ardharatha. Ardharatha is a person who can fight with less than one, so lowest in terms of capabilities. So these are all described as Maharathis, that on their own they can fight unlimited warriors, and they are all assembled on the side of the Pandavas. So Duryodhan emphasizes on that to make sure that Dronacharya and the others who are listening, they don't become complacent. They don't think that we have a much larger army, we have Bhishma and Drona. Duryodhan is saying don't become complacent. There are and he notes 17 Maharathis, but he says Cha also and others, like Saubhadra, Draupadas, Cha, Sarva Eva Maharathi. And there are others like them, saying that there are too many to be probably mentioned over here. Okay, let's go on to the next verse. Okay, verse 1.7. Ashmakam tu vishishtaye tanibod vijottama nayakamam senasya samgyartham tan bravimite. But for your information, O best of the Brahmanas, let me tell you about the captains who are specially qualified to lead my military force. So we see Duryodhan now does a little bit of an about turn. In the previous set of verses, he is glorifying the prowess of the Pandavas army. That they have so many great warriors comparable to Bhima and Arjun. Now he says, but let me tell you how good my army is. Right? And there are two reasons. One is that he's walking a fine line here. Right? If he starts saying that the opposing army is too strong, then his own army will get dispirited. They'll say, okay, they're strong, that means defeat is inevitable. So Duryodhan doesn't want that. Right? Also, he's subtly indicating to Dronacharya that I'm coming here speaking to you, but don't think that I am fully dependent on you. In addition to you, I also have great warriors. And so this is what is a little bit of a psychological mind play, and that he's also putting Dronacharya, he's inciting the chivalry of Dronacharya, the ego of Dronacharya, saying that if you don't fight for me to win this battle, I have others who will fight to win this battle, and they will get the glory, not you. So better for you to fight this battle. Right? And he says that Tan Nibodha Dvijottama. So Dvija means Brahman. Dvija means second born, and generally when one receives one's spiritual first birth is a seminal birth, second birth is at the time of initiation, so it's called Dvija, and Uttam means the best. So essentially saying the best of the Brahmanas. So Duryodhan is also pointing to the quality of Brahmans of being simple. So Kshatriyas, especially the administrator Kshatriyas, they're used to dealing in a lot of intrigue, and we see that in the conversation of Duryodhan. They speak one thing, mean another thing, and refer to another thing, and that's the nature of politics, not the Brahmanas. Brahmanas by nature are simple, right? So Duryodhan is reminding Dronacharya that you are a Brahman. Just be simple and do your duty. Your fidelity is to the throne. Your fidelity is to the king of the Kauravas who have been supporting you. You are there, in a way, you are their employer. So just like a Brahman out of simplicity simply does the duty, you do your duty and fight for us with your full force. Right? So in this way, Duryodhan is trying to encourage his own army. He is also trying to show to Dronacharya that you fight and get glory, or else I will have others, great warriors fighting for me. He's also saying you are a Brahman, so be simple and fight and do your best. We also see here the inherently egoistical nature. So even though Duryodhan is trying to be political, which means speaking in terms of the others, he is also his ego is also coming forth. He says that Ashmakam tu Vishishta me Tanimo Dvijotama Nayaka Mam Senasya. Right? So he is saying that the captains of my army, Mam Senasya. Now factually the army did not belong to Duryodhan. The army belonged to the kingdom of the Kurus, or may have considered to be belonged to Dhritarashtra, but not to Duryodhan. But Duryodhan, in his sense of ego, considers that they are all fighting for him. So that's why he says Mam Senasya. Okay, so we will stop over here at the 7th verse and resume our next discussion from 8th verse. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.